Some of the other things that he says, well, for one thing, he says, you know, ministers need to preach about stewardship. Okay? I'm on our church's worship committee, or as we call it, our Sunday celebrations committee. And I know we've talked about this a little bit, you know. Our minister, who is not afraid to talk about this subject, often feels a little bit guilty about doing it, because he says, you know, if I do that and there's a lot of people are there for the first time, you know, they're going to feel turned off. They're going to feel like this isn't even directed at them. And Christopher makes a very good point, and I kind of agree with him about this, which is there's nothing wrong with having newcomers here that you're serious about stewardship. I mean, if you're not serious about stewardship, you're really saying, I don't care that much about my church. And what he suggests is that the minister should preach about stewardship at least 4 times a year. Okay. One of the other things he says is that the minister should be writing thank you notes 10 a week. You know, letting people know that their contributions are acknowledged and appreciated. Okay. Now, whether you can actually do that all the time, I don't know, but I do think it's true that it makes a big difference when people feel like the minister noticed them. I've certainly found out that if I really need somebody to help me on some project, the best way to do it is not to call them up, but is to call up the minister and say, would you please call this person up and ask her to help me? You know, it matters to people that the minister notices them. It matters to people that the minister cares about their giving. And there's one other point that Christopher makes that we all sort of focused on and felt like there might be some controversy involved, and that is that the minister needs to know about people's giving levels and to treat them accordingly. Okay? If you know somebody is a major donor, it's worthwhile to take that person into your confidence and let them know what you're thinking about for the church. Okay? If you know somebody used to be a major donor and is not now a major donor, or you know has been limping along and just giving a little bit, maybe it's time to do a little pastoral work with that person about, are they okay? Or is there something about the church that is turning them off? There's a lot of information that you glean, and that isn't just simply who do I hit up when I need a big pile of money, by knowing what's going on with the way people support your church. And the minister needs to know about this stuff, and he says it's ministerial malpractice not to know about this stuff. And I'm not sure what ministerial malpractice is. I know a little about legal malpractice, but not ministerial malpractice. But I do think it is important to know and to recognize not just the big donors, but all the people who are giving to your church, and to sort of try and read into the giving patterns whether there's a message that should go out to those folks that's targeted to them. So I think I'll close on this note, but with a quote that several people actually sent me. Most of the churches that I work with are struggling with financial stewardship, and not surprisingly, so is their spiritual leader. I find pastor after pastor who does not have the slightest idea why they believe what they do about stewardship. In fact, many are hard-pressed to even tell me what they believe. There is a great void in stewardship theology, and this must be corrected. We have no right to ask any to do what we are not willing to do ourselves. And I think that is kind of an important, I mean, that to me is sort of at the bottom of it. The pastor needs to model stewardship. Okay? And that doesn't mean the pastor has to be the biggest donor, but the pastor needs to model stewardship and talk about it and make it something that is a point of pride with the congregation. So, third, some of the practical ideas. And, of course, one of the first ones that comes up is the same one that we've talked about before, which is, you know, have a mission and make clear that people know what that mission is. Lead with that mission when you go to ask for money. Okay? Have people tell their personal stories at church. Okay? And if they're willing to have their stories picked up and written about, do that too. Okay? The little testimony I gave earlier was a sort of an example of the kind of thing that you could be doing. You could be having people write articles for your newsletter. You certainly should be including stuff like that in any Canvas literature, it seems to me. Testimony, okay? Having people just stand up and talk in church about why they love the church or why they support the church, whatever their pitch is. And he doesn't kid around about that. Christopher says, once a week somebody should testify. Now, I'm not sure that once a week is the magic number, but it isn't like twice during the Canvas either, I can tell you that. And that is often what happens. I mean, even at our church, which has I feel like a really conscientious and hardworking Canvas committee, it's just, that's when it happens, is during the Canvas or right before. And it needs to be something that people are hearing all the time, why this church matters to me, why I care. And every so often, someone will just spontaneously do that. And, cynic that I am, my first reaction is to say, get them on the Canvas committee. But my second reaction is, gosh, we should encourage more of this kind of thing. It really makes people feel good when someone just gets up and starts talking about why they love the church or why they feel good or how the church helped them or the members of the community helped them during a hard time, all that kind of stuff. Okay? People sometimes need to be reminded of what it is that's so valuable about being part of a church. There is another concept that he talks about that I had never thought about until, but I realized as soon as I read it, it is indeed true for me too. This concept of 3 pockets that you give out of, okay? I don't know how many, if this is ringing a bell for some of you. There's that sort of pocket that you use for paying everyday bills, okay? That's where you pay the rent, you pay the gas, you pay the electricity, you pay your pledge, okay? That's pocket 1. Pocket 2 is money that you save up to spend on something a little bit bigger. Your vacation fund, you're going to buy a new car, whatever it might be. Well, that money is also money that people could be persuaded to give to the church for some sort of a significant event, okay, or a significant project. I mean, you don't ask people to reach into that pocket to pay their annual pledge, but you can ask people to reach into that pocket if, for instance, you're rebuilding your organ. Just picking an example that we're working on now. And people are often glad to do that. It was amazing to me. We did go through a major capital campaign about 12 years ago, I guess it was. I was stunned at how many people made large contributions to the capital campaign who were really very small pledgers in the grand scheme of things. And that's because they were reaching into pocket 2 to do it. Okay? And the third thing, at which at least we are abysmal, and he says most churches are, is planned giving, that is to say giving in the context of estate planning. I mean, I can't tell you how many meetings I've been to where one person or another says, we really ought to have a planned giving committee. And everybody says, yeah, we really should have a planned giving committee. And that's about as far as it gets. I've learned a little bit about planned giving because even without a planned giving committee, we've been very lucky, or unlucky, but in one sense, but lucky that we have had some long-time members who built up pretty good estates who remembered the church in their wills and who left us fairly substantial sums of money when they passed. He says, churches are terrible at this. And, if you think about what you get in the mail from places like your college or PETA, for instance, is the one that I get. They're always bombarding me with stuff about, do you want to include this in your will, or do you want to include this, and the UUA has got all sorts of plans available and people available to help you set them up to sort of encourage members of your congregation to get into it now with the planned giving. I mean, planned giving doesn't work after somebody dies. You got to reach them while they're still alive. I'm not a good one to talk since I haven't updated my will in a very long time, but and another thing he talks about is the importance of letting people know before they join the church what your expectations are about stewardship. We have gotten better at that, although I think it's still one of these things that, if your church is like ours, the people who do membership work don't like to tell people that there's a, you know, there's a admission fee. You know, and it's sort of like, oh, we're going to scare them away if we tell them that they're going to have to contribute money. We have gotten more serious about sort of, and as part of our sort of new member orientation thing, including a fairly significant block of time that talks about stewardship. But no one's ever asked me to come and talk about stewardship. You know, it's the fellowship, the membership committee folks that talk about it. And I think the point, though, is that people need to know, you know, what do we expect of you? A lot of us get people in our churches who are unchurched, okay, and are not used to the idea of tithing or any other kind of significant giving to a church and need to know, what do we expect of them? I was surprised when I found that out, but I mean, I talked to some folks who said, I'll give, and when we do our canvas, I'm often stunned at how people just automatically give what they're asked to give. You know, and that just means they don't know what they're supposed to be giving. And that's something that we should be dealing with at the minute people start to get serious about membership, okay, joining the church. And let's see, preaching about stewardship, again, that's another one of those ones. And finally, there's this notion of targeting communication. Okay. We need to recognize that there are, that the congregation is not totally homogeneous. I mean, there are people who, as he says, there are people, if you start to talk about generational differences, there are people who sort of, if you tell them that they have an obligation because it's sort of the right thing to do, they'll do it. Okay? There are other people who won't respond to a message like that and need another kind of a message. And you have to decide for yourself whether you're going to sort of start targeting by giving level or by age or by, you know, family situation. But there are lots of different ways to target. You don't just have to send one canvas letter. And you don't have to just have one message that you carry out. And that is the point he's trying to make. And it's certainly true. I mean, I know that from talking with people at our church, you know, that people give for different reasons. They have different feelings about the church, sort of depending where they are in their lives. People who have young kids who are in the RE program have a little bit different relationship with the church than people like me who've been there for a long time but have never had kids in RE. But so that's another one of those points, is target your communications. Okay, that's it for the bullet points. Okay, not that much. It's a short book.